Great. So we're going to move now over to Elevian. We're going to be speaking with Mark Allen, talking about GDF11 and the therapeutics associated with that. So Mark, are you with us?
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you about Elevian. So first about myself, I'm a medical doctor turned serial tech entrepreneur. After my last successful exit, I got really excited by the progress in therapeutics targeting aging. I looked at several dozen different projects, went to many different conferences, met investors, entrepreneurs, scientists interested in this space, and got really excited by what I'm about to show you what we're working on at Elevian, work out of Harvard on the GDF11 pathway. And specifically, I was so excited because of the breadth of therapeutic benefit that we are seeing by targeting this pathway. So we started the company just over 3 years ago, and recently developed enough preclinical evidence around stroke models to now head to the clinic. So really excited here. Everybody here, I'm sure, is quite familiar with where all of this started in the Parabiosis experiments. When one of our co-founders, Amy Wagers, was a postdoc at Stanford, she worked on these experiments that showed that old animals subjected to young blood experience a biological reversal of aging by many different measures. This has been repeated in lab after lab after lab, and many of our co-founders have done many of the studies here in the areas of the heart and the areas of the brain. Interestingly, we see the opposite effects as well. So young mice exposed to old blood have accelerated aging. So really the key question here that this raises is which circulating factors regulate aging, which might be responsible for these effects. So our founders were some of the first to look at how do proteins change with age. And out of that work, they identified several factors, but one really rose to the top as quite interesting because so little was known about it, this factor called GDF11. So what was known is that if you knock it out in mice, they make it to term, but they die with malformed kidney, spleen, pancreas, vertebra. So critical for embryonic development, but its role in the developed animal was not well known. So they discovered that it goes down with age, and they estimated what it would take to replenish GDF11 to youthful levels. They did side-by-side studies looking at GDF11 daily injections side by side with the Parabiosis model. And much to everybody's surprise, they found that daily GDF11 injections reproduce many of the effects of Parabiosis. So they rejuvenate the aged brain, restore youthful vasculature, and stimulate neurogenesis in key regions of the brain. They take the heart that has, with age, lots of left ventricular hypertrophy and restore it to a youthful morphology. And we now know also restore cardiac function after heart failure models. And also in the aged skeletal muscle, which everybody knows who's experiencing aging, deteriorates in the rate of repair, deteriorates in function. It restores those youthful aspects, so the rate of repair and the function of the skeletal muscle. So this was published in Cell and Science in late 2013, beginning of 2014, and was recognized as a top scientific breakthrough. So more recently, we started a company out of this to commercialize this research, and our lab, our founders' labs, and many other labs have now replicated and extended many of these findings, showing that GDF11, the same dose, okay, effectively the same range, can be used to reverse a number of different age-related diseases. This is all animal model data. So really exciting, the breadths of findings that we're seeing across the liver, kidney, lungs, heart, in inflammatory disease, in diabetes and obesity. So really this raises a big question is, where do you start? So our big goal as a company is, like many companies here, to promote healthy aging, to prevent the diseases of aging, to be a geroprotector. But we need to get to market one disease at a time. So it's interesting, we go to the opposite approach. Where can we impact the most devastating possible disease with the shortest possible treatment window, where there is no other existing treatment? So what we found after doing many studies, much analysis, that one area really rose to the top for us, and this is stroke recovery. And I'm going to share some of this data, but we have some very exciting data that GDF11 can restore function after a stroke, can help the brain to heal itself. The other area that's quite exciting, but of course a much more crowded market, is in the area of diabetes and obesity, where we also see that just a few days of dosing can have significant improvements in both healthy weight reduction as well as improved glucose metabolism. So as I mentioned, our company is founded by 3 professors out of Harvard and a postdoc, and with their support and teamwork brought together a team of drug development veterans who have collectively brought over a dozen drugs to the clinic across the team, have a couple of successes, entered the market, and well over $1 billion in total exit value. So a couple things about the company. So just over 3 years old, raised over 15 million, have 10 full-time employees and lots of CRO work that we're doing, and really a massive market opportunity. Here are some of our investors, our institutional investors involved in the company. So one of the unique things about Elevian is so little was known about this GDF11 pathway that our founders in Harvard patented quite broadly the use of the natural protein to treat a number of age-related diseases, as well as new compositions of matter that can modulate GDF11 activity, many of which we are working on today. So why stroke? So number one, it is a massive unmet need. So the number 2 cause of death worldwide, 650,000 ischemic strokes in the US. Interestingly, we have data that shows that GDF11 can overall improve the vasculature and also could potentially work for hemorrhagic stroke. We're starting in the area of ischemic stroke, which is about 80% of strokes in the United States. So the only drug for stroke, TPA, is limited to the first few hours, and it eliminates the clot in ischemic stroke. There's also a device, a thrombectomy, that can last a few hours longer. But after that initial few hours, there is no treatment. So today, only single-digit percent patients, less than 10% in the United States, get any kind of clot-busting therapy. And half of those patients have ongoing deficits. So as a result, stroke is the number 1 cause of long-term disability, both in the United States as well as globally. So our stroke data starts with work by our co-founder Lee Rubin that was published initially in 2014. And he showed that GDF11 can restore youthful patterns of vascularization in the brain. So as we all know, our vasculature deteriorates as we age. So GDF11 appears to, now we know it's not just in the brain, but it's all over the body that it improves the quality and quantity of the vasculature. Now in the brain, we see secondarily neurogenesis in neurogenic regions of the brain. Interestingly, GDF11 we know does not cross the blood-brain barrier. So it's a great thing that it can be injected systemically, IV or subcutaneously, and still see these kinds of effects. So after we published that initial data, 3 different independent groups published different models of stroke. So in the young mice and young rats and in old mice, using the same injury model, so where they transiently occlude the middle cerebral artery, which is the most common location for stroke in humans. So in all 3 of these studies, they used the same dose, 0.1 milligram per kilogram, which we now know is the low end of the therapeutic range across many different diseases. So they all dosed once per day. They dosed for between 5 to 7 days, and each one started at a different time point, one within the first 24 hours, one within 5 days, and one at 7 days after the stroke. Interestingly, all 3 of these reproduced the same data: significant improvements in motor function recovery, neovascularization, improved vascularization, and neurogenesis. Now, the young mice and the young rats, most of them survive the stroke, but in the old mice, there's a significant mortality. And I'm going to show you that. Actually, I don't have that slide. So significant mortality in the old mice, about 40% of them die, but only 10% of them die when GDF11 is given. So it's not just about survival though. So that's a significant improvement, but it's really about motor function recovery. And so what we've done is we've taken these models and we've gone to the most rigorous possible animal model of stroke. And it's a rat permanent ischemia model. And using that rat permanent ischemia model, we have demonstrated now in multiple different studies that we see motor function recovery. We've optimized dosing to a point that we have significantly clinically meaningful effects where we've gotten expertise saying you have enough to go into humans based upon this data. So happy to share that data under CDA with anybody who is interested as a potential investor. So talk a little bit about stroke. So stroke, a lot of drugs have been tried in this, what this figure calls this hyperacute phase of stroke, the first 24 hours, trying to save the brain. And there have been a lot of failures in that space. So what we are working on is not that first area where it's a medical emergency and there is existing treatment. Rather, we're waiting until the patient is stabilized and then we start treatment. And what we're seeing is that GDF11 helps the brain to heal itself. So really significant new kind of treatment option, and very excited about this data. So while we have not yet begun our clinical trial, we do have some data looking at protein levels in humans. And this is an assay that looks at the combination of GDF11 and GDF8 in humans. And what this says is that humans that have the lowest quartile levels of GDF11 and this GDF8 combination have a significantly higher risk of disease and death measured over a 9-year study period. So this is looked at the beginning of the study period. GDF11 levels predict your risk of disease and death. Of course, this does not mean it's causative, but when you add this together with all of our preclinical data, we think it gives us a better chance of being successful in translating. So this stroke market is a massive market. We could be an incredibly successful company just based upon this alone. But as I mentioned, this is the first of many applications of this drug, several of which we are pursuing preclinically today, as well as we're working on other novel molecules that can target this pathway that can either be injected less frequently or taken orally. So one of the areas that we're kind of the furthest along in is this area of diabetes and obesity. So what we and others have discovered is that GDF11 mimics a calorie restriction phenotype. So it provides a healthy, durable weight loss and improved glucose metabolism. This is non-controversial data. This has been replicated in many different labs at this point in time. Really, the question is, how do you target human disease, which is what we're really advancing our understanding of right now. So just looking at a couple of pieces of data here. So this study done by Katzenparty, who did her postdoc at our co-founder Lee Rubin's lab, but totally independent of us, showed that GDF11 with just a week of treatment can produce a healthy weight loss. So reduces white adipose tissue, decreases serum IGF-1, and increases serum adiponectin. So it mimics in many ways the effects of caloric restriction. And this effect is maintained at 5 weeks out. So really exciting data. This is data from our co-founders. This is showing that GDF11 improves glucose metabolism. This is a high-fat diet-induced mice. And we've also done aged mice as well, and we see also improvements in glucose metabolism. So where are we as a company? So right now we're in the process of scaling up production of GDF11 and about to begin our IND enabling studies early next year. And with that same drug, our phase 1 safety studies. Now, the development of the protein itself, the scale-up manufacturing, the safety studies are synergistic to multiple different applications that we're exploring right now. And in the best possible scenario, we would have multiple phase 2 studies with this same drug going on simultaneously at about the middle of 2023. So in addition, we're working on a number of discovery efforts, some exciting efforts there, but I want to move on just to be able to take time for Q&A.
Well, that's great, Mark. The Q&A would probably be best to be taking place in the breakout room because we're on our 15-minute slot. But that was a very good presentation. Okay. Thank you. Right on the money. So thanks very much for your time today. That was great.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.